Most likely, you will think that I am crazy and paranoid, but believe me, I myself would not want everything described below to be true. I was sitting at home alone, sipping beer and watching another TV series. It was already about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was inexorably falling asleep. I turned off the computer, but as soon as my head touched the pillow, the beer asked to come out, and I was forced to get up. Out of habit, I didn't turn on a light in the toilet, and that's where it all started. I immediately remembered all my childhood fears and horror films that I had watched throughout my life. A sticky fear enveloped me more and more, and now I was afraid to get out of the push, but I still overcame myself and calmly walked to the bed. The next morning, remembering this incident, I just laughed and immediately forgot it. But the lower the sun went, the more the tension grew. For some reason, I really didn't want to be alone at home. I even called several people, offering to drink together, but everyone was busy. What happened next that evening changed my life forever. It was already evening. I, as usual, was sitting at the computer, and then suddenly I heard a noise from another room. I turned down the sound and heard it again. I already thought it was neighbors, but still decided to check. Walking down the corridor into the room from which it was coming, I heard it again, and that's when I really got scared. This was the sound my parrot made when he started hitting his beak against a mirror. The cage was flimsy, so it rattled a lot. Everything would be fine, but my parrot died a couple of years ago. Overcoming fear, I opened the door, but naturally, there was nothing inside. An hour and a half passed, and 1.5 liters of beer passed through me, and the fear gradually subsided. Remembering that I had vodka in the refrigerator, I decided to go for a walk, although I never drank vodka alone. Entering the kitchen, I again did not turn on the light, and as soon as I opened the refrigerator, I felt a heavy gaze on me. In a second, fear turned into panic, but I was afraid to move. The light from the light bulb in the refrigerator was the only thing that protected me at that moment. What was standing behind and looking at me began to approach, and I stood, staring at a piece of sausage, and prayed for a miracle. And it happened. The refrigerator beeped disgustingly, reminding me that it shouldn't be left open for more than 30 seconds, and the look disappeared. Grabbing vodka, I flew into the room like a bullet, turned on the light, started the music, and sat until the morning, without closing my eyes. After that, I was afraid to be alone at home for a week. I either invited friends to my place or stayed with them. And when he was still alone, he turned on the lights in the entire apartment and tried not to leave his room. I prepared food during the day and brought it to the room so that I had something to eat at night, because I couldn't sleep properly. I might also add that I started drinking quite a bit. In an alcoholic stupor, everything seems less scary. After about a month, everything somehow forgot itself, but I still turned on the lights everywhere. Sometimes I thought about all this, and in the end I came to the conclusion that I was just having problems in my head, because I had never seen physical evidence of the existence of what frightened me so much. This thought was like the last lifeboat on a sinking ship. I promised myself that if this happened again, I would simply make an appointment with a psychiatrist, and together we would solve my problems. But everything turned out to be much worse. One day, after drinking 3 liters of beer, I fell asleep. Waking up at night because I really wanted to relieve myself, I got up and walked to the toilet on autopilot. As soon as I opened the door to the toilet, I began to sweat, and goosebumps began to run down my back. The only light was on in the toilet. Only in the toilet. Although I turned on all the lamps in the apartment myself. Once inside, I locked the door and hid in a corner, praying that the light in the toilet would not go out. If it had gone out that day, I would probably have gone crazy. In the morning, I found myself crying near the toilet. My bones ached, probably a good half of my nerve cells had died, but I didn't care about all that. The main thing is that I survived. The next week I went on such a binge that I wouldn't recommend it to my enemy, but it was impossible to drink endlessly, and there was no money for drinking anymore. Having sobered up, I realized that everything had gotten even worse. Now I always felt eyes on me, even during the day with the lights on. I would like to end my story at this point, but the most terrible thing is happening right now. While I am typing this text, the door to my room is equipped with patterned cloudy glass, through which only silhouettes are visible. For the past hour, out of the corner of my eye, I have noticed some movements behind the glass. I tried not to look towards the door, but in the end I couldn't resist. Looking at the door, I was filled with indescribable horror. I saw him through the glass. I don't know what it is, but it's looking at me from behind the door, and I'm scared as never before in my life. I left alone at home on a random Sunday when my parents brought my brother to some event. I was loving the freedom and everything was going great until I decided to leave my house to see my friend. My parents specifically told me not to leave the house, and I did anyways. Not thinking in the moment, I left my house and I completely forgot to lock the door. I came home hours later and I had a terrible gut feeling. Something felt weird and I noticed that cabinets were left open and stuff was scrambled around the house. I began to become very startled, but I didn't completely believe that someone was there because it was so quiet. I started shouting throughout the house to see if anybody was there. There was no answer. I started to feel better until my phone started ringing. I looked down and it was an unknown ID. Looking for attention, I answered the phone and I heard deep and heavy breathing. I started to get extremely scared. It felt straight out of a movie. I kept asking, "Who is this?" repeatedly, until the phone hung up. 2 minutes later I got another call and I answered to the deep breathing. It sounded like an angry voice and I started to become impatient that they weren't saying anything. They hung again and I got aggravated. I got another call from the unknown ID and the breathing started again. Out of nowhere I heard a deep and quiet voice whisper, "I'm in the house." My heart stopped and chills ran down my spine. I've never been so scared in my life, but I acted tough, thinking it was a prank call from my friend or brother, knowing I was home alone. The caller hung up this time and I started to hear creaking from upstairs and suddenly I heard loud footsteps. Luckily I heard something drop before he started sprinting downstairs. I was able to get a head start on the intruder and I disappeared into the woods and immediately called the cops. The cops reported and they found the door left wide open. Once upon a time there was a boy named Bob. He really liked to stay at home alone. He lived with his mother and father in a 3-room apartment. And so, once again, Bob was left at home alone. I came home from school, threw my bag into the far corner, and started playing GTA. Oh yes, I forgot to say what the layout is in Bob's apartment, so that you can better imagine the situation. When you enter the door, there is a short corridor on the right and there is a kitchen. When you walk along the corridor, there is a toilet on your right. Then if you stand near the door, there is a long passage, at the end of which there was a storage room where all sorts of unnecessary things are stored. Jam jars, old toys, etc. In the middle of this passage on the right is a room with a door. In the room there is a TV, a sofa, and my mother's table with a sewing machine. My mother loved to sew. And at the end of the passage on your left is Mom and Dad's room, and on your right is Bob's room. Well, the furnishings of these rooms need not be described, because all the action will take place in the hall. Well, in general, Bob is sitting at the computer, calmly playing, and suddenly he wants to drink. He went to the kitchen, and, passing by the hall, out of the corner of his eye he noticed in the doorway that someone was moving there. He was a smart and brave guy. He didn't believe in all the stories about ghosts and other evil spirits. He sharply opened the door and did not see anything strange. Everything was in its place. The typewriter on the table in the middle of the room, the TV in the corner, and the sofa. Well, it was my imagination, thought Bob. I got to my goal, the water tap, got drunk and went back to the computer. He walks past the hall again and sees that the machine has been unplugged from the socket, but at the same time it is sewing by itself. Bob stood for about 30 seconds and could not move, because he understood that the machine itself could not work. Having come to his senses, he ran out of the apartment, but the door did not budge, as if someone was holding it on the other side and did not want Bob to leave the house. The guy was seriously scared and started yelling, stomping his feet, screaming, and generally throwing hysterics so that the neighbors could hear him. However, no one responded to his call. Desperate, he prepared for the worst, when he saw a strange shadow resembling a man from the side of his room. The shadow was not very tall, maybe half a head taller than Bob, with ordinary arms and legs, like a human. Only one thing was confusing in this shadow. Her arms and neck were moving unnaturally. It was wringing its arms so that it seemed like it would break them right now, and it was turning its neck a full 360 degrees. Bob became very scared, but the machine continued to work. Bob got very scared and ran into the closet. locked the door, and sat shaking. About 40 minutes passed. Everything seemed to calm down. There was deathly silence. Bob was about to get up and open the door, and as soon as he approached it, he heard footsteps approaching the toilet door. "Okay, these are the last seconds of my life," Bob began to say in a whisper. "Lord, help me. Forgive me for everything I did wrong." He repeated all the time in a whisper, when suddenly a voice was heard from the other side of the door. "Bob, have you locked yourself in the toilet?" It was Mom, his own mother. Bob was so glad to see her. He immediately opened the door and saw that same shadow, and now a creature that said, "Maybe you will allow me to visit the toilet, otherwise I've already been waiting for who knows how long." I'll tell you guys a true story. I was 14 to 15 years old then, such a gangster age. One day my parents gathered to visit their friends for the weekend. They wanted to take me with them, but I refused and was left alone at home. I'm not lying. With the cat. The cat is also a participant in the story. Well, my parents left. I waved to them through the window, an exemplary son, and began calling my friends, like we'll have a party without supervision and restrictions. But bad luck, whoever has other plans, who left. I won't bore you, I was left alone. Back and forth. It was late in the evening. I watched TV, strummed my guitar, and that's it. Damn boring. Let me, I think, listen to some music. A guitar on the wall. I turned on the Mayphone, put on my headphones, and plunged into the world of beauty. And at some point, suddenly such a feeling arose, not alone in the room. You probably know how it is. So, I take off my airs and look around the room suspiciously. No one is around, not even a cat. Well, I think glitches have attacked. I listen to it. It just means putting on headphones. The string of the guitar tinkling, as if someone had pulled a finger. What the ner? There's a guitar on the wall. There's no one nearby. I don't see a cat nearby. Yeah, it's starting. I had troubles with a brownie at one time. I was strangling him at night. The spirits are completely gone. It's not even night, but late evening. Let me go get the cat. After all, there's a living soul nearby. It's Kama. I went, took the cat, fed it, and brought it to my room, and he was kind of upset, looking at one wall with wild eyes. Well, damn it. He called the defender, and he needs to be calmed down. And then the string tinks again. My heart starts beating, something faster, a little scary, and the string is already different again. Tinkling, and most importantly, while I'm not looking in the direction of the guitar. No, I don't think there's a place for me in the room. I'll go take a bath, have a cup of coffee. I go into the bathroom, turn on the water. Then the cat scratches the door and asks to come to me. He likes to lie on the washing machine while I'm in the shower. I started it, undressed, and splashing into the water. I lie there relaxing. Then the light went out, but the most interesting thing was that you could hear the click of the switch. Both are getting creepy. He got out, carefully opened the door, clicked the switch, the light came on. I went back to the bathroom. Only into the water there was another click and the light went out. It's no longer funny to me. It's like crazy. Here the cat is still acting weird. His fur is standing on end. He's looking at the door with wild eyes. Protector and Kama. Yeah, I think Sasha has relaxed. It's time to get out and boldly check the whole apartment. I open the door. The cat doesn't want to go out first. Usually, he always flies forward. Okay, I'll go myself. The traitor cat stayed in the bathroom. I went out, turned on the lights everywhere, walked around the house, everything was clean. I calmed down and went to watch TV. Then the cat flew in, jumped into the chair, and became quiet, as if sleeping. A little time passed. The cat raises its head and looks towards the corridor, and of course I stared there. What kind of trouble is there? I looked, and there was some kind of shadow on the floor, and it seemed to be moving closer and closer. My hair stood on end, and not only on my head. My heart wanted to jump out of my chest. And then I can't even explain what happened. I seemed to pass out. My eyes were open, and my consciousness disappeared. When everything returned to normal, I was sitting on the sofa. The TV was showing something. The cat was already sleeping again. Damn things. In short, I didn't fall asleep until the morning. I watched all the programs in a row, and at dawn I passed out. And I don't even know how to interpret this incident. Has anyone encountered something similar? This is the story that happened to me. Believe it or not is up to you. This happened in November. My parents went for a week to visit some second cousin in North Carolina. who supposedly needed help with wedding preparations. I stayed at home with my 5-year-old sister Mia. We lived in a private house, not far from the city. Day 1. I woke up quite early. My sister was sitting on the floor and sorting out her toys. It was necessary to prepare some food and feed the child. Half an hour later, breakfast was ready and I called Masha into the kitchen. After enjoying the cereal and juice, my sister ran to my parents' room to watch TV, and I started washing the dishes. Soon a friend called me and invited me to go for a walk. Without thinking twice, I agreed. It was impossible to leave Mia at home, because she was afraid of some monster. Well, like most children, so I had to take her with me. We walked for a short time and returned home by lunchtime. My sister didn't want to eat. Of course, during the walk she ate enough sweets and cookies. Mom would have beaten me for this, but oh well. My sister and I had separate rooms, but while my parents were away, she settled in mine. Time flew by very quickly, and soon it was already very late. I put Mia to bed and started watching the movie. Suddenly some sounds came from the kitchen. Pausing the movie, I headed towards the source of the sound. There was no one in the kitchen, and I returned to my room. I no longer wanted to watch the movie and went to bed. Day 2. I woke up around 12. There was no sister in the room. Her absence didn't seem strange to me. Most likely, Mia is sitting in her parents' room and watching cartoons that are usually on at this time. And so it turned out. I was allowed not to go to school, but this did not free me from homework. The day passed very quickly. Nothing interesting happened. Day 3. That day my sister woke me up. She screamed and I had to run to her to find out what happened. From my sister's story, I understood that she saw a man in the window who looked at her and then disappeared. What nonsense. We have a good security system, alarm system, and all that. It would be impossible for someone else to get into the site. I thought that my sister was imagining things and did not take seriously her request to check the area around the house. Later, Mia calmed down. We ate and decided to take a walk. We returned at 7:30. What were we doing all this time I was on the street? Yes, actually, nothing. My sister just didn't want to return home. After dinner, we sat down to watch a cartoon. This made my sister feel calmer. I couldn't sleep that day. Mia tossed and turned all night, and I imagined some sounds. Day 4. My mother's call woke me up at 10:30. She asked if everything was fine with us and if we needed to bring something from North Carolina. I said everything was fine. We were having a good time and there was no need to bring anything. Of course, I reassured my mother, but my anxiety remained. On this day, Mia and I locked ourselves in the room and did not leave it. We brought food in advance. It was already 2 a.m. Suddenly someone started knocking on the room. Knock, knock. My sister was scared and I hugged her and began to calm her down. Nothing will happen. Knock, knock. This time the knocking was louder. Nothing will happen, I repeated in my head. Day 5. I called my friend and asked her to come. An hour later she was already sitting in my kitchen. After listening to my story, she thought I was kidding her, but I swore that it was all the truth. After that night, my sister went everywhere with me. Of course, the child was very scared. How happy I was when my friend agreed to stay overnight with me. After dinner we all went to my room and locked ourselves in again. Soon footsteps began to be heard. So heavy and rough. Everyone was filled with fear. We walked on the first floor, most likely in the kitchen. My sister was curled up on the sofa, and my friend and I were listening to strange sounds. Half an hour later someone knocked on the door. Knock, knock. We sat in silence. Knock, knock. My sister squealed quietly and came up to me. Tears appeared on her face. Knock, knock. This time the knocker had no intention of leaving. Knock, knock. We couldn't even move. They started scratching at the door. Oh, that terrible sound. Soon the sounds died down. The clock showed 4:07 a.m. Day 6. All. My parents will arrive tomorrow. This all must end. My friend swore at me and left, saying that she would never return here again. My sister and I walked around the whole house, but found only traces that led to the basement. We were smart enough not to go there. That day we decided to go to our grandmother and spent the night with her too. Day 7. Last. We returned from grandma's at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The parents warned that they would be home around 10 in the evening. My sister drew terrible pictures all day. They showed the man she had seen a few days ago at the window. At 8 o'clock in the evening, we sat in the living room and watched TV. Half an hour later, we heard footsteps again. I took Mashed in my arms and went up to my room. Suddenly the light turned off. The door began to open quietly. My sister buried her face in my shoulder. I saw the silhouette of a man. He stood still for half a minute and began to approach us. That's it. This is the end. The front door opened and Mom's voice was heard. The man disappeared. I begged my sister not to tell anyone about what happened. She agreed and we went downstairs. We all sat down at the table. Our parents told us about our aunt's bad character and other nonsense. But I didn't listen. I couldn't get this man out of my head. What if he comes again? When I was 22, my uncle showed up at my small one-bedroom bungalow. As always, every time any of my 4 uncles showed up, my heart sank. To say that BV with messed up would have been the understatement of the year. He has always been a dodgy character, but the uncle I have the strongest relationship with out of the 4, personally for me the best of a bad bunch, and that's scraping the barrel. He, like the other 3, was a criminal at that point and associated with some pretty unsavory people. There was nothing new about that. None of the rest of the family has broken the law. My grando was a long-service soldier and a hard-working family man. Likewise, Gran gave birth to 9 babies, and in between those times had very responsible PA jobs in London. Their 5 daughters, although not having easy lives and having their own personal troubles and tragedies, have all managed to grow up in the same house without breaking the law in any way, all supporting themselves and their children by maintaining, again, very good, responsible jobs whilst raising us, their children, to all, in one way or another, be high achievers and really good people with strong moral compasses. Back to BV. He had obviously been up to no good, as he was paranoid, jittery, and on edge. He was also using in a big way. I called my mom and she came around. I told BV he could stay the weekend with 2 conditions: no stolen goods and no drugs. He agreed a little reluctantly and settled down. Mom decided to stay too in case it went pear-shaped. It did. The next day was Friday and my day off work. BV went out early. It was a lazy day. I was just doing a bit of tidying up. I was cleaning around a massive pot plant and stuff down inside it. I found a huge bag of suspect-looking white powder, which didn't look for personal use, various nasty-looking weapons, and several nice-looking pieces of jewelry. I was very narked off, to say the least. But after showing Mum, I left the dubious stuff where it was, as I needed time to think about what I should do. When BV got back from wherever it was he went, I asked about the items. He lied, as usual, saying that he had down a job, legal of course, for an old friend, and that was his payment. I told him straight out I didn't believe a word he had told me, and that I wanted him and his stuff out first thing in the morning. The next day Mum and I got up and noticed BV was gone. I looked for the stuff and sight was still there. Mum had to work that morning. She told me she'd be straight home after, and I settled down for a quiet, chilled morning. Around 11:00 am, there was a loud knock on the door, followed by someone having fun with the buzzer. As I use a wheelchair, it takes me a bit of time to get to my front door if I'm alone, so I was getting more and more annoyed by the incessant commotion. On opening the door, I came face to face with the 3 of the meanest, nastiest, and skankiest men I have ever seen. They all looked straight ahead, and because I was at a lower level, their eyes went down to meet mine. To be fair, they all seemed surprised by my appearance. I was very small and skinny, and looked more like 14 than 22. They all looked at each other in utter shock before I said, "Hello, can I help you?" The middle gangster, the nastiest looking one, said, "We're looking BV, sweetheart. Is he around?" One of the others said he was staying with a girl. My name. I was breaking inside, but the sheer audacity of my uncle made anger took over my fear and made me braver. I said, "No, he's not around. He's gone. He won't be back, and that's me. I'm his niece." The 3 thugs looked really uncomfortable and shuffled, looking at each other. I said, "Well, he has something of ours. Do you know where it could be?" The middle mean one asked. "Yeah, I'll get it for you. Wait there." I told the 3 of them and shut the door on them. As I did, I heard one of them saying, "That's low even for BV. You see her, she's a kid in a wheelchair." When I got back with their belongings, I shoved it at the meanest one and said, "When you do see BV again, tell him from me if he even thinks about coming here again, I'll call the police, and that goes for you too." The mean one said he had our stuff. We had to get it back. I said, still blagging. That's fine. I'm just saying what I will do. The three thugs nodded and left hurriedly after they left. I was shaking all over. I was really scared and upset. When Mum got home, I told her about the incident. She went ape. I know that at a later date she saw her brother and threatened him with something nasty if he ever came near me or brought his criminal scumbag mates around me again, and to give his due, he never has. The year was 2005 and my family was gone for the weekend, so I decided what better time than now to watch some horror movies. Using news groups, I downloaded The Ring 2 and The Exorcism of Emily Rose. At some point during the movies, I heard strange high-pitched beep that I have never heard before. I ignored it at first, but after the 3 times of what seemed to be a random long beep, I determined someone was in the house with me. Immediately my heart began pounding as I listened intently to where the noise was coming from. First things first, I needed protection. I went to the kitchen and grabbed the most stabby-looking knife we had. Now came the hard part, clearing the rooms. I started in the master bedroom by opening each closet with a thrusting motion like we used in bayonet training in the army. The closets, bathroom, and under the bed were all clear. Next I did each boy's room with the same step forward and thrust motion. Only problem, it seemed like the person was moving based on what side of the house I was in. I went to the back of the house and cleared the guest room and finally the playroom. Nothing. Yet the random beep still occurred. Standing in the dining room, I felt like I heard something by the door. All I saw was a jacket. I moved it and immediately felt stupid. The random beep was the weekend duty pager. I had never heard it go off before. I know, anticlimactic, but at the time I went from someone's going to try and kill me to it's just a pager. I was a normal man until I read an email. The day started normally. I came home after a long day at work. All I wanted was to play some video games. When I saw I got an email from a random person, I didn't think much of it until I read the header. It said, "Want to hear a scary story that will keep you up all night?" I don't usually read spam emails, but I was bored and thought it may be fun to read. The story was about a man that keeps hearing a tapping sound around his home. He looked all day for it but couldn't find it. That night when he was laying down, the noise got louder. It was so loud he couldn't sleep. This keeps going for days and days until one day he lost his mind. He grabbed his shotgun and started shooting everywhere he thought it was coming from. After he shot all his shells, he slumped down against the wall. He started laughing, not hearing anything. Thinking he was free from the sound, he went to bed, hoping he could get some sleep after days without it. When he closed his eyes, he started to hear the tapping sound again right next to his head. When he opened his eyes, he saw something in the dark before letting out a scream. As I finished the story, I shook my head, thinking to myself that was a weird story, but not thinking much after that. I started to play some games when I thought I heard a tap behind me. I turned around to see nothing but the dark. Maybe that story did scare me a little more than I thought. Realizing what time it was, I got up from my desk and went to the kitchen to make some food before bed. I opened my cabinet to find a pack of ramen, the only thing that kept me alive since I got out of college. The entire time I was making my ramen, I felt uneasy. It felt like I was being watched, someone breathing down my neck. Every time I turned around, there was nothing there. I thought it was still the story messing with my mind. After eating my dinner, I walked around my home, locking all the doors and windows to make me feel at ease. When I was done locking everything up, I laid down to sleep. After some time, I got woke up by a loud tapping sound. My eyes shot open, but my body wouldn't move, no matter how hard I tried. Then the tapping sound started again, this time right next to me. I know I had to look to see if it was just my mind being scared. I gave it all my strength. I rolled myself over to see something I cannot even begin to understand. It was like a thing from nightmares, something that cannot be of this world. After seeing it, all I could do is shut my eyes. I hoped with everything it would just go away and I would be safe. After what felt like an eternity, my clock went off. Hoping it would be gone now that the sun was up, I opened my eyes. It was no longer there. I sat up in my bed, hoping that it was just a dream. Looking around, I didn't see anything. It all seemed like a dream. Then my computer made a sound letting me know I have an email. Getting up, I walked over to it and saw an email, the header saying, "Thank you." I clicked on it and my eyes opened up wide to what I was reading. "Thank you for reading my story last night. I hope it was to your liking. I hope I didn't scare you too much. I just was so excited that someone read it. I just had to come see you. I looked up and over to a mirror hanging on my bedroom door to see the monster from last night standing right behind me with a smile on its face. Frozen in fear, I looked back at the email. The last line read, "I hope you don't mind, but I have a hard time not tapping my fingers on things when I'm happy." Just as I read that, I heard the sound of tapping. I let out a scream of terror.